Assalamualaikum and a very good day to Madam Rozila. In this PowerPoint video, our group will be presenting about analysis of corporate financial performance, a trend and comparative study of PBB Group Berhad and Razak and F&N Holding Berhad. Before we start, we are going to introduce ourselves first. My name is Illiyin Atiqah binti Abdul Razak.
And my name is Riskia Naralita Sari.
I am Nur Raudhah binti Jefri.
My name is Dita Ayu Nirmala.
My name is Illiyin Primadhani.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. I am Nur Raudhah binti Jefri from BA2431B. I am going to present about the course activities of PBB Group Berhad and F&N Holdings Berhad. So I'm going to start with PBB groups first, then we'll continue with F&N Holdings Berhad course activities. First of all, Robert Kwok Hock Niang is the founder of Perlis Plantation Berhad in 1968. He is a Malaysian business entrepreneur and investor of Chinese descent. Then, the Perlis Plantation Berhad changed its names to PBB Group Berhad. That's all a little bit of introductions of PBB Groups Berhad. PBB main business and core activity is the productions of foods and processing edible fruits such as oil, flour, and frozen fruits. FFM Berhad is the subsidiaries of PBB Group Berhad. Then FFM Marketing at Sendirian Berhad is responsible for the domestic marketing of the product that been produced by FFM. Then in the processing sector, FFM Further Processing Sendirian Berhad is the subsidiaries of FFM in the processing raw materials to produce products such as chicken nuggets, burger, and sausage. For bakery, the Italian Baker Sendirian Berhad is a wholly owned subsidiary of FFM Berhad in producing bread, cakes, and buns. This is the product that has been produced by FFM Berhad and the Italian Baker Sendirian Berhad. John Fraser and David Chalmers Smith was the founder of F&N in 1883 as the Singapore Aerated Water Company that produced carbonated soft drinks. F&N is the oldest among all food and beverages company that has been operated for more than 100 years. F&N core activity is in food and beverages. F&N also manufacture 100 Plus, which is a brand of isotonic sport drinks for who enjoy a healthy life, such as hiking, running, and cycling. The picture below is the product that F&N has produced. My friends will continue with the next point.
So next is the strengths and also weaknesses of both company, which is PBB Group Berhad and also Razak and F&N Holding Berhad. And for the first one is PBB Group Berhad, and strength number one is the various quality of products. If we're gonna mention about the strengths of PBB Group Berhad, it will immediately refer to their various quality of products because they have successfully launched several products such as vegetable oil, packaged flour, etc. Number two is has agribusiness subsidiary named FM Berhad, which is the largest flour miller in Malaysia. Also, they are one of the main feed millers in Malaysia. Number three, successfully operated two broiler breeder farms and a layer farm, which is reaching production capacity of 3 million broiler per month and also 20 million eggs per month. Number four, operate environmental engineering and utility business, which is contribute 4% of their revenue. Number five is involved in the property business and they own and manage several retail malls. And for the weaknesses, number one is most of its income depend on the price of wheat. We know that PBB Group Berhad is a grain and agribusiness oriented company, so it means that most of its income will depend on the price of wheat. Number two is distribution of its products is considered weak. PBB Group Berhad is still considered weak in this regard because they consider to only focus on distribution within the country. And for the second company is Razak and Holding Berhad. And for the strength, number one is strong presence. We know that F&N is a well-known company with a great experience, and also they have expanded their business into 12 countries. And number two is diversity of business operation. It is evident that today F&N is a leading brand company, and they are a leader in the food and beverage and also publishing and printing industry. Number three is leading in a strong brand name. F&N is a company that has a big name, and we know that they have the several products that are really popular and well known both locally and also internationally. And for the weaknesses, number one is F&N drinks lack of popularity. F&N produce many products, but there are several products that are less popular than others and rarely being purchased. And this is the weaknesses that company needs to take and find a solution. And for the second is the health issues. And this issue is really criticized by the public because F&N products are made with a high sugar content and the ingredients are not beneficial to the body or for the health. Next is financial history of both company as well. Number one is PBB Group Berhad. You can see this is the financial performance from 2016 until 2020, and in this we can see that the revenue in 2020 there's a decrease in revenue from the previous year, which is from 4,684 million to 4,191 million, and the lowest revenue for the last 5 years occurred in 2016. And next is Razak and Holding Berhad, and this is also the financial performance of F&N Holding Berhad, and they also experience increase and decrease based on company's revenue, but it tends to be stable. And in 2020, we achieved revenue of 3,988.5 million RM, decreased by 88.6 million RM from the previous year. And for the profit of the year, the highest amount occurred in 2019, which is 410.2 million RM. And in 2020, its profit for the year is considered high, which is 410.1 million.
Next is trend analysis. The trend analysis will be shows in tables and diagrams about liquidity ratio, activity ratio, leverage ratio, and profitability ratio from PBB Berhad and Fries and Neve Holdings. Okay, first we have a trend analysis from PBB Berhad. In the left side, we have a liquidity ratio. The liquidity ratio consists of current ratio and quick ratio. The current ratio from PBB tends to fluctuate it, and also for quick ratio, it tends to fluctuate it too. Based on this calculation of liquidity from year to year, PBB Group produces a value of more than 1, which means that this company has good liquidity. And then in the right side, we have activity ratio. It consists of account receivable, inventory turnover, and fixed asset turnover, and total asset turnover. For the account receivable turnover, it tends to fluctuate it, and then the inventory turnover, it tends to fluctuate it too, and then for fixed asset turnover, it's fluctuated too, and then for total asset turnover, it's fluctuated too. From PBB Group shows the instability of turnover in the 5 years period. On average, there is a decline from the previous years. PBB Groups in this case means being able to increase its turnover rate and also successfully to compete with its competitors. This is the diagram from liquidity ratio and activity ratio. It consists from 2016 until 2020. So we have a leverage ratio in the left side. It consists of debt ratio and debt to equity ratio. From the debt ratio, PBB Berhad tends to fluctuate it, and also for the debt to equity ratio, PBB tends to fluctuate it. The conclusion is the PBB group indicated that the company's financial condition was raised because of unstable debt funding. And then in the right side, we have a profitability ratio. It consists of gross profit margin, net profit margin, operating profit margin, return on asset, and return on equity. And then for the gross profit margin, PBB tends to fluctuate it. For net profit margin, also tends to fluctuate it. For operating profit margin, also tends to fluctuate it. And then for the return on assets, it's have an increase. And for return on equity, it has fluctuated. The conclusion is that the profitability ratio is good. And this is the diagram for leverage ratio and profitability ratio. Okay, the second trend analysis is from F&N Holdings. We have a liquidity ratio in the left side. It consists of cover ratio and a quick ratio. For cover ratio, F&N Holdings tends to fluctuate it, and also for quick ratio, it tends to fluctuate it. The conclusion is from the year to year, F&N Holdings produces a value of more than one, which means that this company has good liquidity. And then for activity ratio, in the right side, it consists of account receivable turnover, inventory turnover, fixed asset turnover, and then total asset turnover. For the account receivable turnover, it tends to fluctuate it. For the inventory turnover, it tends to fluctuate it. And the fixed asset turnover, it tends to fluctuate it. And for the total asset turnover, it tends to fluctuate it. For the conclusion is this company has good activity to generate the sales. And this is the diagram for liquidity ratio and activity ratio. Then we have a leverage ratio in the left side. It consists of the debt ratio and debt to equity ratio. For the debt ratio, for F&N Holding, it tends to decrease, and debt to equity ratio for F&N Holdings, it tends to decrease too. The conclusion is that this measurement indicated that the company's financial condition was good because of decreased debt funding. And then in the right side, we have a profitability ratio. The profitability ratio, it consists of gross profit margin, net profit margin, operating profit margin, return on asset, and return on equity. And then for the gross profit margin for F&N Holdings tends to fluctuate it. For the net profit margin tends to fluctuate it too. Also for the operating profit margin tends to fluctuate it too. And then for return on assets, it tends to fluctuate it too. And for the return on equity, it tends to fluctuate it too. So from this measurement, it shows that the profitability ratio from this company, it shows good in performance. So this is the diagram from leverage ratio and profitability ratio.
So after the financial ratios of the companies has been calculated, comparison needs to be done in order to evaluate and compare the financial condition of the companies. Based on the comparative trend analysis, we can see that the liquidity, activity, leverage, and profitability of ratios of both companies from 2016 to 2020 were fluctuated. However, the performance of two companies will differ as their annual financial report affects the financial ratios. For liquidity, PBB Group Berhad had more abilities to pay its short-term obligations from 2016 to 2020 by using current assets compared to Fraser and Nif Holding Berhad, because the company had a higher value in terms of current ratio and quick ratio. Next, in the activity ratios, both companies had a good execution in the efficiency of using assets to generate sales or cash. Nevertheless, the company's performance in activity ratios were disparate. PBB Group Berhad had a better performance in account receivable turnover and fixed asset turnover, which indicates that the company was more effective in collecting debts from customers and using fixed assets to generate sales compared to Fraser and Nif Holding Berhad. Meanwhile, Fraser and Nip Holding Berhad was one step ahead in terms of inventory turnover and total asset turnover, as it could use the inventory and all its resources to generate sales more effectively compared to PBB Group Berhad. Next, PBB Group Berhad was superior in terms of the ability to fulfill and pay for the financial obligations for 2016 to 2020 if compared to Fraser and Holding Berhad. This is because the percentage of leverage ratios for PBB Group Berhad was lower than Fraser and Holding Berhad, which indicates that the company had a lower risk in debt utilization. Last but not least, the profitability ratios from 2016 to 2020 indicates that Fraser and Holding Berhad was more effective in generating gross profit compared to PBB Group Berhad. Despite that, PBB Group Berhad had a better performance in generating net profit than Fraser and Nif, as the percentage of net profit margin was higher, started from 2016 to 2020, which recorded as 26% in 2016, 29% in 2017, 24% in 2018, 26% in 2019, and it increased dramatically to 33% in 2020. Besides, PBB Group Berhad ranks higher than Fraser and Nif Holding Berhad in terms of operating profit margin, which shows that PBB Group Berhad was more effective in generating profit after deducting operating expenses. On the other hand, Fraser and Nif Holding Berhad, however, gained a higher percentage in return on assets and return on equity compared to PBB Group Berhad. The company had proven that they were managed to generate net profit using total assets and total equity more effectively than PBB Group Berhad. So this is the summarization of financial ratios that have been done after the comparison between PBB Group Berhad and Fraser and Nif Holding Berhad. Based on the table shown, it can be summarized that PBB Group Berhad had a better financial ratios compared to Fraser and Nif Holding Berhad.
Interpretation of trend analysis. Significance and importance of the calculated ratios to relevant parties or market players. Liquidity ratios. It shows that the company has a good ability to fulfill its obligations, such as being able to pay employee salaries on time or to make payments to their suppliers. Activity ratios. With the result of this ratio calculation, we can find out how effectively the management regulates in the company's activities. Both companies haven't been able to show good performance because they have some lags to optimize their various resources. Leverage ratios. PBB Group Berhad can be said have a better financial position when faced with the ability to meet its obligation to creditors when compared to F&N Holdings Berhad. Profitability ratios. Both company often experiences instability, but in the last 2 years there has been a pretty good increase. So it can be said that both companies will be able to perform well on their performances, uh, and expected to attract many investors. Ways for the companies to improve their current financial positions. The first one is seek advice from financial experts. I highly recommended this option because they can give you advice and suggest about your finance. And second is recovering outstanding debts. Chase up as many outstanding debts as possible. You can also use the services of a trusted debt collection agency to collect the debts. Reducing business expenses to make your profits higher. And last, expand market share, expand your market reach, take advantage uh, of social media, example, to promote your product. Expectation on the future outlook of the companies. Judging from the several ratios that have been calculated before, we can say that both companies have a bright future. If the ratio results for the next years show good results and become more stable, where there is an increase in so many factors, so many sectors, it's certain that PBB Group Berhad and F&N Holdings Berhad will continue to survive and can compete their competitors, and so also they able to dominate the market and become top three food manufacturing uh, stocks in Malaysia.